So easier to unlock and just a better optic in my opinion. Still not bad. Okay. What is going on? So hello gamers and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be ranking every single scope in Phantom Forces. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're new and comment down below your favorite scope. Please watch until the end, but yeah, there's a ton of scopes to go through here and we'll start with the regular scopes on a DMR. The first scope here is the C79. This is actually a pretty decent scope because it has not only a regular scope on it, but it also has an alt-aim for a little bit of a nice iron sight. It's not a very great iron sight, but it's an alright one. And it also requires like no kills to actually use it. It's actually a pretty decent sight overall for that purpose of just having an iron sight on your sight. So if you want like a medium range optic, it's pretty good, as well as a backup kind of okay close range optic. I'm not going to say it's really great. It's all right iron sight. I'm not going to lie. I give this one a 3 out of 5. It doesn't really have the best medium range or close range optic. But next up, we have the PKA. PKA is actually pretty good. It does have a little bit of a tint to it, and the zoom level is 3 times, which is a little bit intermediate. It's not really the best on this kind of scope because I don't really feel like this deserves a 3 times. It feels more like a 2 or a 2.2 or something like that. But this one also has an alt-aim, which is pretty nice, and it's this alt-aim. Basically, if you press T, you get this scope, which is actually still a 3 times. However, it's a lot less and more obstructive at the same time. It doesn't have this, which is just kind of big, but it also covers your entire screen. So if you want like an actual scope, this is pretty good, and it doesn't have any scope sway, but it is a 3 times optic, which is a little bit unfortunate, I would say. I don't really recommend it too much overall, but if you're a big fan of the Malcolm, this is a lot less kills than the Malcolm 3 times, so maybe check this one out. It's actually a nice scope. I really like it. I give this one a 4 out of 5 because of that scope. It's really good for what it does. Next up, we have the M145. Now, the M145 is possibly more popular than the C79, which is kind of weird because it doesn't have that alt-aim. Maybe people don't like the alt-aim, but I do like having a scope that does not need a canted sight, that just has on top of its regular scope an iron sight. I think that's actually a really good feature. Unfortunately, this one does not have that, and I wish it did. I think I would like it a little bit more if it did have that. It feels a little bit less just all around good. However, I would still give it 3 out of 5. I feel like it does have possibly a better optic picture. But next up, we have the Malcolm 3 times. Now, the Malcolm 3 times is probably one of the best scopes in the entire game by far, if not the best one, because here's the thing: you can run it on a DMR, you can run it on a sniper rifle, and you can even run it on an automatic gun. Is it really recommended that you do that? Not really, because it doesn't have a ton of zoom. However, it's a 3 times optic picture that is incredibly clean, and for some reason has really low camera recoil for a 3 times, probably because it's so massive. And it also has one of the cleanest optic pictures in the entire game because it's just a cross. You know, it's just that. It's just 2 lines that are intersecting. It's actually such a good optic because of that, because it's so easy to see what you're shooting at, and also, since it's so massive, great on like every gun in the game, even automatic guns. It's pretty good on auto. The Malcolm is going to be a 5 out of 5. Is it the best for sniper rifles? In my opinion, no, but I see people running it on a sniper rifle all the time, and it's also a really low requirement for kills as well. But next up, we have the PSO1 scope. Now, the PSO1 is an alright optic. I'm not going to say it's the best optic in the game, but for me, really not that great. It has, I think, a 4 times, but it has the full zoom in, as you can see. Like, it really zooms in, which I'm not really a fan of. It just zooms in such a, like a weird way that it actually feels like you're fully aiming down sights with a sniper rifle scope, but you're not actually getting the real benefits of a sniper rifle scope. And also, this optic picture is just kind of weird. I don't know. It like zooms in and then zooms back out. And then, of course, you don't need this entire reticle scheme here. So I'd give this one a 3 out of 5. I think it's still pretty good. It's definitely not like a 2 out of 5. You could use it, and it does feel pretty good on like the SVU. I just recommend the Malcolm. The Malcolm's more kills as well, or actually less kills, so easier to unlock and just a better optic in my opinion. Still not bad. Okay. What is going on? But next up, we have the TA44 ACOG. Now, the TA44 ACOG is an ACOG with no zoom. It's super weird, and it's only a 2.1x magnification. So what it really feels like is a PILAD 3, but a scope, and also like more obstructive. I'd give this one a 2 out of 5. I think it's actually pretty bad. Is it unusable? No. Is it a 1 out of 5? No, but like it's still pretty close. My ranking basically goes 1 out of 5, nothing redeemable, nothing at all there. 2 out of 5 is like there's a little bit of reason to use it. 3 out of 5 is pretty good, pretty average, not super special, but pretty good. And a 4 out of 5 is like extremely solid, great, almost top tier, and 5 out of 5 is just like amazing top tier. Everyone should probably be using it. Malcolm is the only 5 out of 5 so far in this list, and I feel like everybody should be using the Malcolm at least a little bit if they want to use a scope at all. The TA44 doesn't really do anything too special. It has less zoom than the PILAD, but it just isn't really that different from the PILAD, and it's probably more obstructive as well and has a very similar reticle as well. So should you be using this one? If you want to, but like I don't really recommend it. It's alright. Next up, we have the ACOG sight. Now, the ACOG has a 4 times zoom, which is pretty good. It also has a pretty good reticle. It's essentially your best intermediate optic picture without being a full-on scope, because 4x, which is more than the Malcolm, but it doesn't actually obscure your entire vision. It's also a pretty good optic. I don't think it's like an amazing top-tier optic picture, but for like style points, it's up there, you know? Like, it just looks pretty cool. I really like the reticle on it. It's not really the best reticle. The best reticle would probably be something like the Malcolm or just a dot, but you know, this has some cool stuff on it. I give this one probably a 5 out of 5 as well. The ACOG sight in most games, it's like one of the best sights in the game. In fact, it's probably like the only intermediate rifle scope that's in like literally every single game. So I would recommend trying it out if you have not. But next up, we have the VCOG 6x. Now, this is one of the first high zoom optics that you can get. In fact, it is the very first one on most guns, except like, you know, sniper rifles. And this has, of course, a 6x zoom. It does also have an alt-aim, which is awful. Do not use the alt-aim. It's probably like a 3x, I think. This one, kind of like a pseudo ACOG sight. It's just weird. Like, that reticle is so strange. Even though this is probably more realistic to the actual sight, I don't recommend that one. I do recommend the 6x, but only for like a gun that a 6x would be kind of helpful on. Not like a DMR, maybe sniper rifle, but at that point you have better optics in my opinion. You could use this on like a DMR that is a little bit slower, like maybe the Scar SSR or even the SA58 for headshotting. However, I don't really recommend it too much because you can just use an ACOG before this or use a Malcolm. This does have a 6x zoom, but like, do you need a 6x zoom? Not really. But like I said, it's not a bad optic. I really prefer the old reticle, and that is on the VCOG 8x, so I'll probably talk about that one in a bit. But for the kill requirement and for like how decent it is, I would give it a 4 out of 5 because if you're using a sniper rifle or a DMR and you just don't like the default scope or the fact that you don't have a high range optic, this is the first one you can get, and it's really not a bad option for the very first one you can get, which is honestly pretty good. Like, I think that's a good option for players with low kills or even players with high kills on the gun who just like the optic, because I can see why you would. The TA33 ACOG is a little bit different to the regular ACOG. It has technically, I guess, more accurate scoping in, like it has a better reticle technically speaking, but because of how the optic actually looks, it's actually straight up more obstructive by a long shot. I don't know, it's just super obstructive. Now, this alt-aim is actually not a bad optic picture. However, Malcolm, VCOG, they more or less do this better, so I would be giving this one a 3 out of 5 because I don't think the default one is as good as an ACOG. I don't feel like the alt-aim is as good as like other sites, and I probably would use the default ACOG over both versions of this, you know? The default ACOG, it has that 4x by default. This is actually, I believe, a 3x, and then I think it goes to like a 4, maybe a 5x, but it's really not that helpful. In fact, oh wait, no, it might still be a 3x. Okay, no, don't use it. It's actually just like a PKA. I actually kind of prefer the PKA, which is weird because this doesn't have that kind of like green tint to it, but I just don't prefer this optic. It's not bad, but it's just not that great. TA33 is going to be getting a 3 out of 5. Next up, we have the Henselt 3X, which used to be a pretty trash sight until they gave it this alt-aim, which is actually pretty good. But the default scope is this. That is an awful piece of garbage. It is a 3x, which is pretty cool, and this alt-aim is not bad, but the thing is, it's not great, and the freaking Malcolm is like 1/4 of the kills that you would need to get this, and it just doesn't make any sense why this is such a high kill optic. It's going to be getting a 2 out of 5. It does have a decent alt-aim, which means it has a little bit of something redeeming. I don't know if there's going to be any scopes that are necessarily going to be getting a 1 out of 5, but honestly, maybe this one. Actually, yeah, like I don't really recommend it at all. Next up, we have the Henselt Z24, which is actually, for some reason, you get this on the MP5K, and I don't know why. It is a 4x zoom, which is kind of nice, and it does have that alt-aim, which I kind of like the alt-aim a little bit, but the default scope is so bad. This is the default zoom, so you have to press T every time. I feel like the ACOG does this better. ACOG is also 4x, and the default and only aim on the ACOG is significantly better than this. Is this bad? No, I actually kind of like this. It's basically the motion scope, but less zoom, I guess, but I'll give it, honestly, give it a 3 out of 5. Basically a mid-range Mosin scope, which is kind of cool. However, I don't think it's really good on the guns that it like comes out on, which is, you know, the MP5K and stuff. I don't recommend that at all. Next up, we have the Swarovski scope, which is an alright scope if you just don't have anything else on an AUG. However, if you're using literally any other gun, unless you're making like a meme setup, don't ever use this. First off, this scope is like meh. It is not that great. And second off, this, you know what this looks like? It looks like something called the C79, which is like 40 kills, so just use that. This is a 1 out of 5. Next up, we have the TA11 ACOG, and now this is probably my favorite ACOG. I made a video ranking the ACOGs if you want to see that. It goes extremely deep into all the ACOGs and what they do, and I probably rank this one the highest out of any of them. The reason for that is pretty simple. It's basically just a regular ACOG, but a nice cool reticle and an alt-aim, which is really cool. I love the little circle you get. I think it's really, really cool, and also the alt-aim on it is kind of cracked as well. It's not like the most amazing amazing scope alt-aim of all time, but you get it for free, so it's kind of good. Next up, we have the PU1 scope. Now, the PU1 scope is literally the Hensoldt Z24. However, it's a 6.2 magnification. It is like larger when you aim in, and it doesn't have that alt-aim, which is kind of nice because like you don't need the alt-aim. It sucks. I don't think it's necessarily like a super trash scope, just not really that great. It feels like a little bit inaccurate. I don't feel like this little notch at the top is really that great of a way to aim at people. And second off, it does have scope sway, which is kind of annoying. The only other optic that has scope sway so far in this video has been the VCOG. I do feel like the VCOG is better. It has a little bit less zoom, not like a ton. It's only 0.2 less. It's just like a better optic, you know? The dot is way easier to use to aim. I don't think this is too bad. I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5, but I don't feel like it's as good as the VCOG. That's why the VCOG is a 4 out of 5, and this is like a 3. And then we have the FF3NV. This is a night vision scope, and as you can see, no, you can't see because you can't see anything with this. This is a 1 out of 5 optic. Yes, it technically has the ability to give you night vision, but it was not properly tuned at all, because you can see like this and this are the same brightness. You can actually turn down your graphics if you want to get this to actually work as a scope, but like, you gotta turn down your graphics. That's so stupid. It makes the game look worse. Anti-aliasing goes down. The render distance goes down. It's really not that helpful to just turn down your graphics just to get a scope to work. It does have 2 different zoom levels. I believe like a 6 and a 3, which is pretty cool, and I do like the optic picture overall, but the fact that you have to turn on your graphics and it just makes everything super green, it is awful. It is a 1 out of 5. Yes, technically it does have a redeeming quality, but that redeeming quality is something that you will literally never have to use unless they add like a nighttime map. Even the maps in this game at night, they don't actually need you to run like a night vision scope. But next up, we have the PSO1M2. Now this is like the PSO, but extra zoom and a little bit of a different optic. If you like the PSO1, this is basically like the older cousin, more long-range optic version. If you're going for tap firing on a DMR, it's pretty good. It's not really the best for like every gun in the game, but it can be used on a sniper rifle as well. But is it the best for snipers? Not really. This one is going to be getting a 3 out of 5. I think it's a decent optic, but not great. Next up, we have the TA01 ACOG, which is kind of just like the upgraded version of the C79. It has probably a better optic picture, a 4x zoom, which is pretty nice, and it just has this. I really like. It's basically just a Malcolm, but a little bit extra stuff on there. Not a big deal though, not super obstructive. It also has more of that ACOG nice zoom, where it doesn't like actually fill up your entire screen or anything, but it will show you what you're shooting at. Then it has this, which is a nice iron sight, better than the C79 in my opinion. I'm gonna give this one a 5 out of 5. I do think the TA11 is a little bit better for my needs, but I'd say overall, because this has its own iron sight, I think it's a really good optic. In fact, maybe a more versatile optic than the TA11. But next up, we have the Electra 5X. Now, the Electra 5X is actually a pretty decent optic because of the fact that it has a laser. Is it a great optic? Not really. And it has like such a weird reticle that doesn't feel very high quality. Like the image quality feels kind of low on it. Even though it's not, it isn't like a low quality image. It just feels kind of low. And that's just my opinion. Have that red laser if you want, maybe alt-aim or just have a laser without having to run a laser. 3 out of 5, you know, it has something redeeming to it, but it's not really that great. Next up, we have the reflector scope, which has an awful alt-aim and then an alright main view, I guess. This is for the G11, and I don't really see anybody actually running this on the G11, even though the G11 can be used for longer ranges, but I feel like an ACOG will just do you better. This one's probably a 2 out of 5. I don't think it's terrible. I just don't feel like you really need it, and it's also such a high kill requirement as well, and it's so incredibly obstructive. Like, it's probably one of the most obstructive regular zooms, as you can see. Like, how can you see anything with that? So 2 out of 5 on that one. Next up, we have the VCOG 8 times. Now, the VCOG 8 times is basically a VCOG 6x, but a little bit extra zoom and one of the best reticles in the entire game. I love this reticle. The stuff around the main reticle is kind of cosmetic, but this center kind of cross thing is so good for hitting shots with. I don't know why. It's so thin, but it's so easy to see because it's red as well. So it's really good for hitting your shots because you can just see what you're looking at, which is kind of not something you can say for a lot of the optics on this list. A lot of them are kind of just annoying to see stuff, and this one, not so much. It's just such an easy optic to see with. So yeah, I'm going to be giving this one a 5 out of 5. It's got a lot of zoom. It's not for everybody. And the alt-aim is once again trash, so don't use the alt-aim. But yeah, an overall really, really good optic. I had it on my Scout for a while, and I had it on my Hecate for a while. Then we have the Susat scope, one of the worst scopes in the entire game, because it's just the TA01 ACOG, but worse in both ways. This is the main zoom on it. It's terrible, and then the alt-aim is just as terrible, but the game ended, so I can't show you. This one gets a 1 out of 5. It's so incredibly expensive too. 4,000 kills. The TA01 ACOG is about 60% 40% of the kills for it, which is still a lot of kills, but if you want to pre-buy it, this is going to be like 40% less expensive and a better optic in both ways. Last up for the regular scopes before we get onto the sniper rifle scopes is going to be the global offensive scope. Global offensive is basically a Malcolm, but 10 times zoom, which is not necessarily something you would love on most guns in this game, but a lot of people do like it on sniper rifles because it has 10 times, which is essentially the sniper rifle standard. Very few sniper rifles have less than a 10x zoom, especially for the bolt actions. I think there's like literally none outside of like the M1903 that don't have a 10x by default. Okay. But it's a 10 times, so not really the best for anything that is not a sniper rifle or a very slow shooting gun, you know, because like the recoil with that 10 times is going to be very high visibly, and also it will slow your aiming down sight speed, which is kind of annoying. Not something that a regular optic would actually do. It will be getting a buff, but not by a ton, where it won't actually slow your aiming down sight speed as much. But I'll give this one a 4 out of 5. I feel like overall it's kind of just better to run a Malcolm. Of course, you don't have as much zoom, so it's better for a sniper rifle, but at that point you may as well just use a default sniper rifle scope. But this is, for what it does, really good. So yeah, I will be giving it a 4 out of 5. Now we're into the scopes. First off, we have the Leopold M8 2X. It's a 2X. Don't use it. It's 1 out of 5. Next up, we have the PM2 scope, which is a 10X optic on the AWS. Actually, this is the AWM one. AWS has like a red plus mark on it. This is actually a pretty decent scope overall. 10 times zoom. Not really the best in terms of optic picture, but it's definitely not the worst. It's basically just a plus mark, but it has like some weird dots and dashes on it that are probably helpful for a real life sniper rifle for like shooting targets at range, but in this game there's not really a ton of drops, so you don't really need it. But yeah, it is a 10x zoom, which is pretty good overall, and I think it's a decent one. Next up, we have the Classic LM. This is classic of sniper rifle scopes because it's the WAT2K one, you know, the WAT2K, pretty popular sniper rifle. PM2 I gave a 4 out of 5. I'm gonna give this one probably a 3 out of 5. I don't think outside of the WAT2K, and on the WAT2K it's pretty good. I don't think you should really use it outside of that though. So 3 out of 5 for this one. Next up is the COM 10x42. I really don't like the scope at all on the K14, but overall it's not like a bad scope. I just hated the K14 until I actually took off the scope and started using the iron sights. I just don't really like the scope. It zooms in like a, I guess, kind of nice way, but even though it only is a 10x, it just feels like it zooms in so much. I don't really like it too much. I will give it a 3 out of 5. It's not terrible, but not great. And we have the Leopold M8 6X, which is just a 6X version of the 2X. Don't use it. It's trash. It's just not really that great. I'd give it probably a 2 out of 5. It's not terrible though. Then you have the Remington 700 scope, which is an alright scope. I don't really use this scope on the gun. I give it like 3 out of 5. The Remington isn't really that great with it. I do recommend more of like a non-sniper scope build than the Remington, at least for me. Remington isn't like a super powerful sniper rifle. It's got like a 100 stud torso kill range, which is pretty good, but like not super great enough for it to be like a all-range sniper rifle, I'd say, in my opinion. Next up, we have the Intervention scope, and I love this scope. I think it's really good. I use it on the Intervention basically exclusively. I don't really use a non-scope on the Intervention, and I feel like even off of the Intervention, it's still a good scope, you know? So I give it a 4 out of 5. It's not the best scope in the entire game. Most of the sniper scopes you just kind of like can use on other guns if you want to, but like they're best on the guns that they're originally on, but that's just my opinion. Maybe you could use this on other guns. Next up, we have the Leopold Mark IV. The scope is really good. Imagine like the PM2, but like the central optic part is super clean. I don't know. It's on the M107, and it's kind of great on the M107, but I feel like you could use it on any sniper rifle, and it would still be really good. This one gets a 5 out of 5 from me. I could see why you wouldn't like use it because you don't like the M107 or just don't like the scope on the M107. What happened to my sound? Okay. Yeah, really good scope. I'd give this one definitely a 5 out of 5. But then we have the Sidewinder ED, which is on the TRG and the Hecate. This is another fire scope. I really like this scope. It works great on the Hecate. It works great on the TRG, and it's just a really good looking scope. The only issue I have with it is that, especially on like the SVDS, it has the dust covers on this. Like, look at this dust covers on top of the scope, and they just get in your way when you're sprinting, which is super annoying. And we have the NXS, which is the BFG 50 scope. This is another great scope. I feel like the Hecate, the BFG, and the M107 got like the most fire heated scopes of all time. They're just so good. I don't understand. This is another scope that you could use on literally any sniper rifle, and it would still probably be like amazing. In fact, if you want to pre-buy any high level scope on a different sniper rifle, this might be the one. Like the BFG, you just hit shots with. I don't know. And the scope is just absolutely fire. I love the scope. I think it's probably one of the best scopes in the game. But then we have the final scope on the list, the Sagittarius 40X. If you want to aim in like a billion times, and this is a pretty funny scope, but if you actually want a good scope, it's still pretty good, but not as great as people would say because of a few different things outside of just the actual optic picture itself. I think the optic picture on it is pretty good, you know? It's actually a pretty good scope. Basically like the Intervention, and it has that 40x zoom, but you can actually just press T and use a 10x, and you're like, okay, I can just use the 10x, and that's like a BFG or the Intervention scope, but better, right? But not really. Here's the thing. First off, it heavily slows your aiming down sight speed, even on the 10x zoom. And secondly, you have to press T when you spawn in, which is just dumb. And if you don't, you have a 40x scope on a sniper rifle, which is just a little bit too much. The only reason I use this scope on the BFG is because I have the extremely slow aiming downside speed loadout, which allows me to cross map people when I quick scope, and it's just a really funny setup overall, you know? So I give this one a 4 out of 5. It does have a ton of zoom. Optic picture is really good, but it does have a bunch of downsides to it that make it not really the best scope in my opinion. I just prefer like the BFG scope. But for this setup, which is a meme setup, I do prefer this one because it will slow down your aim down sight speed. But anyways, gamers, if you guys did enjoy, that is ranking every scope in Phantom Forces. Let me know your favorite scope down in the comments, but I will see you guys in the next one. Peace. Have a nice day.